but I want to start with what I think is super significant and very, very important. And I can't believe I'm saying it, but I have to say it. Go Gators. And you know how much that pains me to say as a Tennessee fan, given the fact that my beloved University of Tennessee Volunteers almost never beat the Florida Gators in football. I think, by the way, that should be a foregone conclusion this year because I think things are falling apart with Billy Napier as we get ready for year 3. But we'll have more time to talk about that in the football season next year. In the meantime, Florida Gators have done something that I think is really important. And for any state attorney general or any red state governor and or their staff that watches this clip, I think every state needs to do the exact same thing. Today, effective immediately, every diversity, equity, and inclusion employee at the University of Florida was fired. They all had to leave. Their jobs ended immediately. The $5 million that was being spent, which is a crazy amount of money, on their salaries will now go back into the general fund, and they will be able to hire actual employees to do actual jobs, not corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion zealots. And I would say this in general. I think every diversity, equity, and inclusion employee on the planet should be fired. This is the foundational strength and basically prerogative of identity politics. And this is honestly a huge part of this book. It was a huge part of my last book. I believe that identity politics, combined with cancel culture, which is its kissing cousin, are the two foundational elements destroying America. The idea that based on your race, your gender, or your sexuality, in some way you are profoundly different and can never get along with anyone else, I think is actually incredibly toxic to American life. I give credit to Ron DeSantis. I give credit to everyone involved in this decision at the University of Florida. And I want this to happen in every red state with every red attorney general and also in companies. I probably will be founding, in fact, I am. I've got a new company. We're going to be selling coffee. It's going to debut in the next couple of weeks. I'm working on a mortgage company. I'm working on a bunch of different companies that I am going to have control of down the line in a substantial way. I sold OutKick a couple of years ago. I will own and be involved in many companies for the rest of my life. I can pledge to you that any company I own will never have a diversity, equity, and inclusion aspect of that entire business. And I would say if you run a business right now and you're doing that, I think you are misguided. I think it is a failed process, and I think you could better allocate resources and fire everyone involved in that entire universe. I agree with everything the University of Florida is doing here. I think we need more of this, not less, and I give immense credit, go Gators, to the University of Florida for making this decision.
So he wants DEI eliminated everywhere. Let me be very delicate with what I'm about to say. And it's important because I want y'all to know several things. Number one, Clay Travis, again, came on this show, made a lot of good points in the past. I respect what he has to say in most instances. I don't always agree. Half the time, at least, I don't agree. But I respect it. And one of the things that we're not going to do, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm speaking especially to my brothers and sisters out there, my black brothers and sisters, we ain't going to be calling him no racist or anything like that just because he feels the way that he feels. We ain't going that route. We're going to stick to the issue at hand, okay? Because he is entitled to his feelings. He's just not entitled to his facts. We have our facts too. And when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, let's make sure we understand a couple of things that are incredibly imperative to bring up. How about history? You see, when you see people like Clay Travis, and especially Ron DeSantis, who just finished getting his butt whipped by Donald Trump throughout the primaries, which is why he had to back out long before Nikki Haley is going to end up backing out. Okay? Trying to beat Trump, and that didn't work. And by that, I mean just trying to echo some of the sentiments that Trump had articulated throughout the years. Didn't work for him. But DeSantis, in all likelihood, wasn't qualified to be president because it's one thing to be petty. That's damaging enough. But you can't be petty with no pizzazz. And that was him. And he picked the wrong people to fight up against, and he paid dearly for it. But these kind of issues that Ron DeSantis brings up, that Clay Travis has signed off on, why are we ignoring history? See, Clay Travis, that's my problem. Respectfully. That's my problem. And for those out there that said, oh, you know, him and Clay Travis, whatever, if he wants to talk about it, we'll talk about it. Nobody's running. But that's my problem. History. Why do we ignore history when you take the position that you took? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. What's wrong with diversity? What's wrong with inclusion? Equity might be challenging because not everybody deserves equality, but meaning in terms of opportunities. You got to perform. You got to perform. And I shouldn't say you don't deserve opportunities because everybody deserves opportunities. They just don't deserve the same results. And if that's what you're arguing about and that's what you're fighting about, that's something for the black community to take into consideration because we have to hearken back. You see, we have to go back to the existence of affirmative action because DEI essentially emanates from all of that. So when we're talking about DEI, we got to go to its origin, which is affirmative action. Why did affirmative action exist? Why were these some of the things that we have to talk to? It was intergenerational poverty among black Americans. It needed to be addressed. Jim Crow law, slavery before that, civil rights legislation 64, voting rights legislation 1965. We act like everything has been on an equal playing field. You know better than that, Clay. Why didn't you bring it up? Why didn't you say that? Why didn't you touch on its origin? Why don't we get a bit more specific and talk about when we're talking about affirmative action, which basically was the mother of DEI, essentially. Why don't we talk about that for a second? The first order of business was opportunity. Wanted equal opportunities. When we recognize the fact that access was being denied, then it was access with opportunity. Okay? Where you can make a legitimate argument if you care to defer to history is bringing up the notion that some people put out there, even some from the black community or some advocates for affirmative action. They were asking for equal results. That's where the doors opened. And that hole that you were looking for, meaning some in white America to exploit and take advantage of so you can eradicate such things. That's where the opening took place. Because in a capitalistic society, we're not all supposed to be getting the same results. To the victor goes the spoils. If you're smarter, if you work harder, if you're more efficient, if you're more effective, you get more than people who aren't. We understand that. And had you brought that up and made that argument, as wrong as you might be because of your refusal to really engage and take ownership of history, you still would have made a salient enough point to make your argument a bit more compelling. But you ignored that, Clay Travis, and you're smarter than that, which means you didn't ignore it because you didn't know it. You did it on purpose. You're a lawyer by profession, by study. That's what you studied. You came on this show and talked about how you were in the Virgin Islands practicing law before ultimately you made transitions into this field. You sold OutKick. You got different business opportunities coming up. Man, I ain't got no problems with that. All for it. God bless you. But if you're going to bring up the subject, tell a story. When you want the eradication and the elimination of DEI, why is that? Is it the dissipation of the white populace in the country? Is it the open borders that have more migrants coming into this country? Is it the fact that the white population is dissipating while other populations are growing? And you have some folks in white society that are incredibly worried about their quote unquote position that they've enjoyed for so long. Is it all of those things? If it is, say so. If we're going to talk about it, talk about it. If you're scared, say you're scared. Say it. Because see, black folks been scared coming out of the womb. We recognize that we come out of the womb at a disadvantage. Don't bring up affirmative action when white women have been the primary beneficiaries of affirmative action. Don't bring up affirmative action when it just got overturned, and the only reason that it got overturned was because folks at Harvard of Asian descent were suing the school and the courts got involved. Let's not forget all of those things. I did it. Did you think I would? I wasn't going to do that. Why would I do that? Supreme Court Justice of the United States, majority 6-3, overturns 2 lower courts' decisions to say that Harvard's admissions program violated Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 because Asian applicants had a lower likelihood of acceptance over the students of color. So the very thing that was supposed to help students of color have now been used against them. Not because of white America. It was because Asians, another minority in this country, was suffering because of it. And these kind of things that have transpired, these are exactly the kind of things that folks are talking about. When Ed Blums and his Alliance for Equal Rights group announced a lawsuit against some venture capital firm, and the kind of things that have been taking place over the last 30 years where dark money groups have spent an inordinate amount of time and resources challenging affirmative action in college admissions. And now they went about the business of targeting corporate America, targeting universities and what have you. And as a result, it's emboldened some of these college universities to consider, and in the case of the University of Florida, to flat out eradicate DEI. I am not saying, nor am I sitting here in defense of every single individual that has been a proponent of DEI, nor their actions. We're not specifying anything. I'm speaking in a very generic and general perspective when I say or ask respectfully to a Clay Travis of the world, why'd you leave history out? Why did you leave out what provoked DEI? Why did you leave out what provoked affirmative action? To sit up there and call for its eradication across the board, where race and color and gender and sexual orientation and all of this other stuff doesn't get taken into consideration. Why do you ignore why it existed to begin with? If you acknowledged why it existed to begin with, and you said that was then, this is now, I would feel you. Because at least you're taking ownership of the iniquitous acts of the past by your race of people. Not all, not most, but some. And if you take ownership of it, then you're empowering yourself to change it. But if you don't take ownership of it, you could never, ever, ever be inclined or provoked to change. Is that why you ignored the historical context that comes along with your position? I'm just wondering. Should DEI be modified? Absolutely. Should certain flaws in DEI policy be addressed? Absolutely. But to call for its out and out eradication is to ignore history and the role certain people played in its existence to begin with. We cover sports, Clay Travis. You know that. You've been covering sports for years. Why the Rooney Rule exist? There were qualified African Americans looking to be coaches in the National Football League for years. Why was it implemented in 2003? Why was it modified just years ago? Why was it still a problem until recently? Because you had the white establishment, the white power brokers within the National Football League that was so egregious in ignoring the possibility that there were African Americans and other minorities very qualified to be head coaches. Even the league got involved itself with Commissioner Goodell and others and forced its implementation. You know this, Clay. You cover sports. How is DEI any different? The existence of DEI is an indictment against a history in America that far too many want to ignore and act as if it either never existed or there's no way in hell it could still be in existence today. You want to be at the 50-yard line with a 50-yard head start, and you want to stay in that position instead of having to allow folks to catch up to the 50-yard line so we can ultimately engage in a fair and equitable and inclusive race. That's what this is about, Clay Travis. You know that. Because the one thing I would never accuse you of is being dumb. You ain't dumb, my man. You're very smart. What you left out in terms of specifics should have been in there. Whether that's intentional or not, an intentional omission or not, is not for me to say. I'm not qualified.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion, in my opinion, as it is applied today, is actually foundational racism. And I'm going to break down each of these words and explain why. And then I'll talk about the history of how it's come to be. Diversity. To me, the only thing that matters when we talk about diversity is diversity of thought. There is not one single employee that I am aware of at all of ESPN that has come out and told you that they are voting for Donald Trump. Not one. I just told you I'm voting for Donald Trump. People have the right to vote for Donald Trump, Joe Biden, RFK Jr. You can vote for the Green Party candidate. You can vote for Cornel West. You can vote for whoever you would like. What does it say about the intellectual environment and freedom of thought at ESPN that not one single employee has come out publicly and said, I'm voting for Donald Trump? Compare that to the number that will come out and proudly say they voted for Obama, or they voted for Hillary Clinton, or they're voting for Joe Biden. I think that's significant. The only diversity that should matter is diversity of thought. I don't care if we have a bunch of people of different colors that all have the exact same thought. The only reason why diversity is a strength is because of the First Amendment, conflict of ideas. University campuses are overrun by Democrat voters. It's hard to find a Republican voter in a position of prominence inside of most university history departments, English departments, political science departments. They almost don't exist. Law schools. Actual conservatives employed at law schools almost don't exist. Again, the only diversity I care about is diversity of thought. Focusing on diversity of color as if that is somehow a strength doesn't make any sense. Cosmetic diversity is not diversity at all. Why does it matter if everybody looks different but thinks the same? That ain't diversity. So I'm opposed to everything except diversity of thought, which is the only diversity that matters. Equity. Equity is BS. I believe in equality of opportunity. I believe that the United States should treat all people, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, gay, straight, male, female, the same under the law. There is a reason why Lady Justice is blind. Equity doesn't do that. Equity tries to give artificial versions of success based on what we think society should look like. Equity is the opposite of everything that Stephen A. does. Is talk about sports. We don't want equity in sports. We want inequality. Somebody is trying to be better than someone else. We don't want everybody to be even. We don't want to start a sporting event where one team gets 10 extra points because of where they're from or what their daddy or their mommy did. Everybody should be equal. But the outcome should not be equity. It should be equality of opportunity, not the government reaching in and saying, oh, we're going to make this percentage employed this amount. No, I am opposed to equity with every fiber of my being. And remember, this is important. They changed equality and started talking about equity, thinking that nobody was going to notice because equality didn't give them the outcome that they wanted. Okay? I'm opposed to equity. I'm not necessarily opposed to inclusion, but this is what capitalism does. If you have a market, you win. If you serve a market, like Stephen A. does, First Take is the highest rated show in its time slot. He deserves to be compensated for that. He's not equal to Skip Bayless. He crushes Skip Bayless. If Skip Bayless crushed him, Skip Bayless would deserve to get paid. The person who does the best serving their audience, whether it's McDonald's or Burger King, whether it's Stephen A. Smith or Skip Bayless, deserves to be rewarded. Capitalism, by its nature, is inclusive because markets demand that all be served. Now, then Stephen A. went into this discussion. I think he had Michael Eric Dyson on, who basically just believes that America is an awful place, and he would argue that that all of us should have to pay trillions of dollars in reparations. I'm a believer that you should be judged. This might be radical. Not by what somebody did before you, but by what you yourself do. I could not vote for President of the United States until the 21st century. In 2000, I've been public about my voting. In 2000, I voted for Al Gore. In 2004, I voted for John Kerry. 2008, I voted for Barack Obama. 2012, I voted for Barack Obama. 2016, I voted Gary Johnson. 2020, I voted Trump. 2024, I'm going to vote Trump. That's all my presidential elections. I was born in 1979. I went to integrated public schools in Nashville, Tennessee, K through 12. I went to a high school named after Martin Luther King Jr., MLK. I was the president of the student body when I graduated in 1997, okay? I don't believe that anybody who grew up and is around my age, that they have dealt with any crazy amount of racism that demands that we reach in and alter the outcome of business. That is, if you were born like I was around 1980 and you went to public school like I did starting in around 1985 in Nashville, Tennessee, I don't think you were treated any different if you were white, black, Asian, or Hispanic. I graduated from a school named after MLK. Our principal was a black woman. I had tons of black teachers. I had tons of black classmates, not really any Hispanic classmates at the time. I don't know what the public schools would look like in Nashville now, but we didn't have a huge Hispanic population. A lot of Asian kids at my school. I think everybody was treated the exact same. I really do. And I think I would have had the exact same measure of success if I were black, Asian, Hispanic, or white. I believe that America historically has had all sorts of issues of racism. By the time I went to school, I think we have more issues of fake racism in America today than we do actual racism. And I think if you were raised in the 90s like I was, and if you were raised in the early 2000s like I was, I think that we have gone backwards in race relations since those days because of the principles of DEI. Now, if you are 70 or 80 years old and you are watching me right now, or you are older and you grew up in a Jim Crow era, you grew up in a pre-civil rights America, your experience is totally different than mine. And I don't begrudge the decisions that were made to address those clear wrongs. But at some point, you move from trying to address wrongs to embracing racism, but trying to argue that it favors others. This is why I'm opposed to reparations. This is why I'm opposed to affirmative action. This is why I'm opposed to diversity and equity in the name of race. I think it's entirely wrong. I saw Michael Eric Dyson try to say Michael Jordan wouldn't have existed without DEI. What is he talking about? Look, Michael Jordan and every other black athlete, I didn't grow up in a Jackie Robinson era. I grew up with black athlete posters on my wall. I had Bo Jackson with the pads and the baseball bat. I had Jordan dunking from the free throw line. I had Eric Davis, big Reds fan. Barry Larkin. My era did not grow up where athletes were treated unequally. Oprah Winfrey was the most watched Daily Show host. Michael Jordan was the wealthiest of all athletes. Tiger Woods made more money than anybody, whatever race you want to attribute Cablinasian to Tiger Woods. And this whole argument, Barack Obama, I voted for twice. Go back and look at Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign. A lot of what he said in 2008 would make him a Republican today. I believe we have gone backward. I think DEI, I think that the identity politics focus of the Democrat Party has actually taken us backwards. I've written a lot about this, not only in my last book, but in the current book. And so I'm happy to debate Stephen A. Smith anywhere. I don't think he's successful because he's black. I think he's successful because he's talented, which is how the meritocracy should work. There are other black guys that got great opportunities at ESPN. I think Bomani Jones is a good example. Dude failed in radio, failed in TV, failed in premium TV, has never been able to create an audience, keeps getting promoted because he's a black guy. That's DEI. People think, oh, Bomani Jones deserves to be promoted because he looks like what they want somebody in that position to look like, and audiences overwhelmingly reject him everywhere, yet he keeps getting promoted. DEI is the opposite of meritocracy. It's the opposite of sports. And so I'm ready to debate this anytime, any place, anywhere. DEI is the antithesis of everything that sports represents. The best man should win. In fact, if you actually want to apply DEI, you're going to have to fire a bunch of black dudes. Because guess what? The basketball team that represents the United States is all black. The best players in the country are black. But if we wanted the DEI basketball team to perfectly represent racial difference in America, you'd have to fire a bunch of black dudes. Only 12 or 13% of that team would be black. About 10 black guys got to get fired. That doesn't make any sense. Best man or best woman should get the job. Best man or best woman should win the championship. I think that Stephen A. Smith has been misled about what DEI actually is. You can be a student of history like I am, acknowledge that America has many sins in its past, as all countries do, and believe that the way to solve things going forward is not with DEI or even any government involvement anymore. Because here's the truth. You go look at the data. Read Thomas Sowell. The black family has collapsed since Lyndon Johnson created the Great Society in the 1960s. Men and women married and had children and families at a, I think, 70% clip in 1960 in America. The legacy of slavery still existed in 1960, way more, in fact, than it does today. And yet, black Americans overwhelmingly were being raised in a two-parent household. Since the Great Society, the black family has been destroyed such that I believe the data is now only about 25% of black kids grow up with a mom and a dad in the household. Why is that? I think it's because of policies like DEI that actually claim to help when in reality they push down overall success. So I believe we should have no state-funded DEI policies anywhere in America. I believe that race-conscious admission should not exist in colleges and universities. I don't think you should get judged on a different standard based on the color of your skin. I think that is racist. And I think it actually pushes black people down, as well as Hispanic people and Asian people and white people, because it divides us instead of bringing us together. I am old school in this way. I believe all of us have way more in common, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, than we do different. And I think the politics of America today tries to tell us that's not true by using race as a proxy to divide us. And I think ultimately, and this is fascinating, and I write a lot about it in my book, the unfortunate legacy of Barack Obama's election was that Democrats believed that identity politics was the only way that they could end up replicating Obama's coalition. Guess what? People are not responding to that favorably because black voters are moving to the Republican Party. Hispanic voters are moving to the Republican Party. Asian voters are moving to the Republican Party. Trump is going to get more minority voters potentially than any Republican presidential candidate ever. Why is that? Because a lot of people, white, black, Asian, and Hispanic, know that identity politics and this DEI universe is broken, and it is the opposite of the American meritocracy, and we should be summarily rejecting it. But again, I'll have a debate about this. And I'll go anywhere, anytime, any place, anywhere. I will show up and put DEI on trial and argue that it is the absence of everything that we should be striving for in American society. I want everybody to be elite. I want everybody to be successful. And I think, honestly, I like Charles Barkley. I think this was a misguided comment that he made on CNN when he said that if he saw somebody in a Trump mugshot t-shirt, he would attack him. Now, I think he was making a joke. But the reality is this: America cannot survive as a thriving country if identity politics remains the law of the land. I'm a white guy. If you see me walking down the street, you have no idea how I'm going to vote. You may know me because I just told you I was going to vote for Trump. But if you see a bearded white guy, brown hair, 44 years old like me, you have really no idea how I'm going to be voting for president when I go into the ballot. Black guys, black women, overwhelmingly vote Democrat. I just laid out the data since the 1960s. How has that helped you? Honestly. The family has collapsed. Crazy stat for you. Men see it. You know that men have not voted for a Democrat since 1964? Lyndon Johnson was the last Democrat politician that men voted for. Everyone since then has been rejected. Women put Democrats into the White House. Why are men overwhelmingly rejecting it? I think a lot of black men are going to show up and vote for Donald Trump in 2024 because they see it and they feel it and they recognize that they've been sold a bill of goods like Hispanic guys do and like Asian guys do. They're not saying Trump's perfect. They're just saying Biden is weak and ineffectual and he is selling a bill of goods. So I would love to debate this. I think history matters. And I think evolving from history matters. I can't and shouldn't be responsible for anything somebody did in the 1800s or anything people did in the 1700s or anything people did in the 1000s. I can only be responsible for the things that I do. And since I have voted in America in the 21st century, 2000, first time I could ever vote, I think America is going backwards on race, and I think DEI is why. And if you want to argue about the legacy of Jim Crow, I think that the left is now full on in favor of racism. And I think the left has more in common today with the Jim Crow era than the right does. And I'll debate that anywhere.